Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about humidity and controlling humidity within the aquarium environment. Now, everybody's aquarium will naturally generate some amount of humidity, and depending on the size of your system, it might be a lot of humidity or it might be a relatively small amount. Also, the relative humidity and temperature within the environment the tank is kept with is also going to impact how much humidity that you get out of your tank based on its evaporation rate. In my case, this being a 1,600 gallon system, I have an enormous amount of space that is going to be open water, that's going to be having rippling currents, a lot of air exchange with the protein skimmer and overflow drains. I expect to have a very high humidity level off of this tank, which could be a really serious problem for your home if you're not prepared for it. Ever since I started planning this aquarium system, I've really been trying to think about how I can mitigate humidity. And humidity mitigation really comes down to three important factors. One, you have to do containment. Two, you have to be able to remove the humidity from the environment. And three, you want to work to minimize the humidity being generated. Now, the current system that I have in place is going to try and do those three things. One of the first things you'll notice is I have plastic on the ceiling, and a little later on in the video I'm just going to go briefly through the plastic hanging process. It was quite simple. The plastic on the ceiling is my first line of defense against humidity entering the rest of my home and trying to contain it into the space here. The plastic covers all of the fish room and also all above the tanks. Now, it's not completely sealed to the wood, it is just inside the aquarium environment. I also have canopy panels that line the entire inside of the tank along with the door here to try and contain as much of the humidity in this space as I can without giving it access to the floor above to where it can absorb into the wood and the floors above, and which could ultimately end up ruining them over time. So that's the real main purpose of putting the plastic up. It does contain it to a certain extent, but it's not airtight sealed, and I'm going to try my best to not do that immediately. But if it comes down to it in the future, I will look to put in some weather stripping and other things to seal it a little better, make sure I control the airflow into the space. One of the reasons I'm not too concerned about it is the fact that my second step of this whole process, which is the removal of the humidity, in my case is in the form of ventilation. Just above my head here, I have ventilation that has a humidistat built in and also a timer and a motion sensor. It's a bathroom humidity fan, and it's designed just for that. When the humidity reaches a certain point, it will kick the fan on and exhausts that air outside. This is a really nice thing to have in my case because it should create a slight negative pressure into this space, and it should help to draw air into the space and not allow it to easily flow out. How well it works practically, we have to wait for the tanks to get running. If there's just too many small openings around the tanks and it's allowing humidity to get too much into the rest of the home, the next thing I'll do is kind of seal it up a little bit more. And if I have to get to the point, I'll cut a specific vent area, put an air filter over it for a furnace, and that way I can really control and filter the air coming into the environment of the aquarium. Also have an outside air draw for my protein skimmer to bring fresh air in. One thing I will caution everybody on, if you're going to use exhaust fans to mitigate humidity, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you have to understand by sucking air out of this environment, you have to have a way for air to get back in. And in the case of this being my basement especially, you cannot create too large of a negative pressure. If you do, what can potentially happen is the furnace and the hot water and all the other exhaust pipes that let all the carbon monoxide out of your home and vent outside could potentially reverse themselves and make an airflow sucking that air in, meaning that the carbon monoxide, even though it's heated, might not be able to escape and might get sucked into the room. So be very careful if you do have any kind of heavy ventilation. This is only 110 cubic feet per minute. It will clear out this space in between 10 to 15 minutes. It could replace the air here. And I've had this fan running for probably at least a year, year and a half. I installed it very early in my build. I wanted to get it done. It kind of also acted slightly as ventilation for my paint booth that I had set up in the same space. And it's worked really well. It's a DC motor, it's Energy Star, and it's very quiet, which were some of the requirements I had. I wanted something quiet. You can see it's a pretty simple ventilation fan. It's just a 4-inch duct outside, and when you kind of pull it open, you can access the humidistat and timer for the motion sensor. I have it taped over, although it doesn't work all that great right now. I'm probably going to put some blackout tape on it, because every time I walk in the room, I don't want to trip the thing on if it really doesn't have to run. This fan helps to make sure that it removes all the humidity in the space, which it should hopefully be able to do the job on its own. Let's talk a little bit about that third and final piece of humidity mitigation, and that's minimization. Minimization of humidity is the final kind of key step that I'm aiming towards with this build. And the measure that I'm really going to concentrate on, the minimization of it, is going to be to put covers on my sump tanks. Now this is a 1/2-inch PVC. I haven't trimmed it all out yet. For my radiant heating system is going to be in this 120-gallon tank. I just had a video that I released on it last week, and since this is going to be a tank where heating occurs, there's also a good chance that we're going to get a lot of humidity and evaporation, especially with a large amount of water flow that's going to be coming through this tank. So I'm going to install covers on this tank. My 265-gallon that has the protein skimmer in it is also going to get one of these PVC covers as well. I'm not going to make it seal in airtight, but I want to try and cover it up fairly well so that just the natural humidity and any kind of salt spray building up from the protein skimmer and the overflows can be kind of contained in the tank. It'll just naturally, form droplets on this and drop it back down in the tank. And I can keep these cleaned off fairly easy. The same thing in my refuge tank. The 150-gallon refuge tank is only going to have 2/3 of it open. The last third I'm going to put a cover on, which again is just taking extra steps to try and minimize that humidity that is allowed to get in the air. There's not much I can necessarily do about the big tanks other than I might try not to let things make like a huge giant ripple and wave in the tank. But I want to make sure that I don't compromise my flow patterns that I really want in those tanks. Those are the main steps that I'm taking to mitigate humidity. I'm going to go ahead and roll the plastic installation now, but I want to address this humidity question. This has been coming up pretty often, so enjoy that video and I'll see you on the other side of it. One of the final steps that I really need to take in order to complete everything I'm doing to the ceiling is install my moisture barrier. In my Q&A video I did a while back, one of the questions that come up is, well, how are you going to protect all the electrical and stuff above the tanks with the open water against humidity? And I'm going to be using 6mm plastic that I got from Home Depot that is rated to be used as a moisture barrier. I'm going to attach this on the whole ceiling all the way over the top of the entire fish room. But in order to do that, I have to remove my light racks and all my plumbing. I need to make sure though that all of my chains and other protrusions that are going to come through the plastic are already in place, so I'm not trying to cut it later on because I think it's just going to end up causing more problems to do it later on. So now that it's all done, most of it's just going to stay in place, and I'm going to cut the plastic around it to give it more of a fit look. With the light racks and the roughed in return plumbing taken down, I'm now ready to start this whole process of the plastic. Now I thought about a few different ways to mount this plastic up here, and I wanted to do it in such a way that if I had to take it down, I wanted to be able to do it without tearing it all out. It could be pretty common to hang plastic with staples or nails, and I really did think that that might be a solution I was going to go for, but I ended up choosing to do something that's a little bit alternative. I was looking at the roofing nails that have the big plastic washers on top, but even those I thought, if I'm trying to pull nails out, I'm going to tear the plastic and things just aren't going to work that well. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to use screws for it. I'm just going to use 1.25 inches. I don't want to just put a screw on it. And what I've done is I had some plastic sheeting that I purchased from Home Depot here. And it's thin stuff. I used it on the inside of most of my canopy sections. And I laid it down with an epoxy just because I wanted to have a little bit tougher moisture barrier than just paint around the tanks. I'm going to use the screws and this plastic in turn so it'll kind of go through it and give it a little bit of a pad so that the plastic's just not being pushed on with a single point. And I'm hoping this gives me a little bit of a reprieve on overstressing the plastic. Once I get that completed, then if I have to ever take my plastic down, I have the ability to just get my screwdriver out and take a few screws out and get access to the plastic without necessarily ripping it out physically. I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and you guys enjoy my little The one part I didn't get to in it was the sealing of the edges of the plastic and also any holes that were in it along the way, either for PVC hangers or for the light rack chains. Essentially what I did, I kind of toyed around with using a few different things. I found that the indoor-outdoor Gorilla Tape, the extra heavy-duty stuff, that's what I ended up going with. I'm going to try it out, see how it works. So far it's holding up everything good. I did test it for a bit. It was holding up pretty good. Since it's outdoor rated, it should be able to handle humidity a little bit better. I did test a couple pieces, get them wet, and what was already stuck on was holding. That was more or less how I completed that piece of the plastic. I still have one little section to complete by the door. I'm going to wait till I get real close to get started. Might even get to the point of starting to fill. And then I'll finish off that last piece of the moisture barrier. I just don't want to put it up and then have to put in other hoses or wires or anything else. I want to kind of do it all at once. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them down in the comments below. I try to get to them as quick as I can. I do work full time, so it might be a day or so before I get to answer or comment. But I really do like to hear some discussions on what everybody out there thinks about how I'm going to handle my humidity control. Do you think it's going to work? Do you think it's going to fail? Or do you have any other ideas for me? I'm always open to ideas and even criticism, because I know some people have come out and said they don't think this will work, and they could be completely right. I have to accept that that's a possibility with this. I have high confidence in it. We'll have to see how it works. I am willing though and prepared though, if it doesn't work, we'll put in new measures to make sure it does. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you disliked it, well, go ahead and give it a dislike. And if you'd like to see more videos on my 1600 gallon system, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll be putting out at least one video a week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.